Look at this map of the Indian subcontinent. By the time Emperor Aurangzeb died in 1707, the Mughal Empire had expanded its borders to their absolute maximum, commanding immense wealth and covering nearly the entire landmass under a single unified authority. To the rest of the world, this was an administrative superpower. Foreign merchants and rival kingdoms viewed the Mughals as an invincible monolith, governed by a vast, highly organized bureaucracy that kept local chiefs firmly in check. But jump forward to 1803, and the British Army is marching into Delhi. The Mughal Emperor, Bahadur Shah II, is reduced to a powerless, exhausted pensioner of a foreign corporation, confined to a few square miles around the city. You might hear that this collapse happened because the later kings were simply weak or too focused on court luxuries. The historical record shows that is a massive oversimplification. An empire of this size doesn't fall overnight because of one bad ruler. To understand how foreign merchants managed to conquer this vast land, we have to perform an autopsy on the Mughal state itself, examining decades of deep internal institutional decay. The cracks began forming the moment Aurangzeb died. Without a clear rule of succession, his sons plunged the empire into a series of fierce, destructive civil wars that killed off thousands of trained soldiers and experienced administrators. This instability created an opening for the nobility. Instead of merely serving the throne, powerful ministers realized they could manipulate the royal princes, installing weak rulers and swapping them out like pawns to control the state from the shadows. Power brokers like Zulfikar Khan and the infamous Sayyid brothers mastered this system. Between 1713 and 1720, the Sayyid brothers alone deposed and murdered multiple emperors, raising teenagers to the throne who would blindly sign off on their demands. These kingmakers weren't trying to strengthen the central government. They were buying time to carve out their own autonomous hereditary principalities in places like Bengal, Awadh, and Hyderabad to secure their personal wealth. When the very officials tasked with defending the empire start cannibalizing it for their own gain, the entire administrative fabric dissolves. The central treasury runs dry, and the state loses its ability to enforce law and order. Running these private regional factions and fighting constant civil wars required vast amounts of liquid cash, creating a brutal financial squeeze that trickled down to the lowest levels of society. To balance their budgets, nobles relied on middlemen who extracted maximum taxes. Resources were siphoned directly into private accounts, bypassing the central Mughal treasury. As demands grew, peasants were pushed to the brink of starvation. The agrarian base was sucked bone dry. Pushed beyond their limits, these desperate farming communities organized. We see massive, localized uprisings led by the Jats, the Sikhs, and the Marathas, who formed roving bands to fight back against the revenue collectors. The empire was now fighting its own starving population. With resources pouring into suppressing internal peasant revolts, the crucial defensive lines along the northwestern frontier were left neglected, unpaid, and vulnerable. By the late 1730s, the forts guarding the mountain passes from Afghanistan into India were crumbling. The soldiers stationed there hadn't been paid in months, and the rival nobles in Delhi refused to unite to send reinforcements. So when the Persian ruler Nadir Shah invaded in 1739, he met almost zero resistance. His army crushed the fractured Mughal forces at Karnal and walked right through the gates of the Red Fort in Delhi. Nadir Shah ordered a massacre of the city's citizens. He emptied the royal treasury and levied heavy tributes on the nobility, hauling away an estimated 70 crore rupees in pure plunder, enough to exempt his own Persian kingdom from taxation for 3 entire years. He also took the jewel-studded peacock throne and the legendary Koh-i-Noor diamond. By physically removing the empire's most potent symbols of wealth, Nadir Shah stripped the Mughal court of its remaining authority. When Nadir Shah finally marched back west, the Mughal Empire was completely paralyzed. The invasion exposed the hidden weakness of the central government to every ambitious local chief and foreign trading company watching from the coasts. By 1761, the empire existed in name only. The Indian subcontinent was fractured into dozens of independent regional states: Bengal, Awadh, Hyderabad, the Maratha Kingdom, all operating autonomously while using the powerless Mughal emperor as a convenient political front. While these regional rulers fought each other with traditional cavalry and wooden handlooms, Western Europe was undergoing an industrial revolution. India remained completely stagnant in science and technology, ignoring the rapid advances in weaponry and manufacturing happening overseas. What India lacked entirely in the 18th century was the concept of political nationalism. There was no shared sense of Indian identity that could rally these competing factions to defend the subcontinent as a single nation. A peasant's loyalty ended at their village or caste. The nobles and chiefs cared only for their personal ambitions, tribal affiliations, or regional territories. Defending the larger geographic boundary from external threat was simply not their concern. This combination of technological backwardness and total political fragmentation created a massive global power vacuum. The old system was dead, but none of the regional powers were strong enough to unite the country and build a modern state. Sitting on the coast, armed with disciplined modern infantry and naval supremacy, was a foreign corporation perfectly designed to exploit this chaos, the British East India Company. The British didn't conquer a thriving, unified empire. They stepped into the corpse of a system that had spent a century bankrupting its farmers, fracturing its military, and selling off its authority. The Mughals had meticulously dismantled their own empire, leaving the door wide open